The knock came just past midnight, 3 hard raps against iron-banded oak, and Aldrich Vane nearly knocked his tea off the table getting to the door. Nobody knocked at the Grapes Watchtower at midnight. Merchants used the lower road. Soldiers used the garrison gate 2 leagues east. The only things that reached his tower after dark were wind and the occasional mountain cat looking for somewhere warm to die. So when the knock came, 3 deliberate strikes, not frantic, not desperate, just firm. Aldrich set down his cup and picked up his lamp instead of his sword. He thought about it. Then he took the sword too. He opened the door. She filled the frame the way a boulder fills a riverbed, not by force, but by fact. Nearly 7 feet of gray-green orc, iron-dark braids matted with ice and old blood. Her left arm pressed hard against her ribs with the careful deliberateness of someone managing a wound that had already made up its mind to hurt. She wore frontier leathers over a clan tunic, both dark with weather and something worse than weather. She looked at him with amber eyes that had clearly seen a great deal of the world and found most of it disappointing. She said nothing. Aldrich said nothing either for a moment. He held the lamp up, not to examine her. He had seen enough orc warriors in his campaigns to know one at a glance, and enough wounded people to know what managed pain looked like, but to let the light fall on his own face. He was 62 years old and built like a fence post that had survived a great many winters. He was not frightening. He had not been frightening for some time. "You need a fire," he said. She blinked once. "I need a fire," she agreed. He stepped back and held the door. She came inside. The Grapes Watchtower had been his post for 11 years, and in that time it had become his in the way that only a place you endure alone can become yours. Every corner organized to his preference, every hook placed where he would reach for it in the dark. A second chair by the fire that had not been sat in since his old friend Bram had visited 3 winters past, and developed the good sense to retire to a warmer valley. The tower was single-roomed on the ground floor, with a narrow stone stair winding up to the watch platform above. It smelled of wood smoke and pine resin, and the dried herbs he kept in bundles along the east wall. The orc woman crossed the threshold and stopped just inside, taking in the room with the quick, complete attention of someone who had learned to know every exit. Then she found the fire, crossed to it, and lowered herself onto the stone flags before the hearth with a control that cost her more than she showed. Aldrich put a pot on without asking. He had oat porridge, salted pork, and dried riverberry from the last autumn trader. He put all 3 in the pot. He was a practical man, and he had always believed that warmth and food were the beginning of most conversations worth having. He set a bowl beside her on the flags and sat in his chair. She ate. She ate with the focused efficiency of someone who had not eaten enough today, or perhaps yesterday either, and she did not look up until the bowl was empty. Then she held it back toward him without a word. He filled it again. The second bowl she ate more slowly, and by the third she had begun to look less like a wound and more like a person. She set the empty bowl down on the flags beside her with a small, precise click, and she looked at the fire for a long moment. "Soldiers came through yesterday," she said. Her voice was low and measured, the kind of voice that had done a great deal of speaking in formal settings and had never needed to be loud about it. "They will have told you I am a deserter." "Nobody came through yesterday," Aldrich said. "The pass has been closed since the 6th. Ice." She was quiet for a moment. Something in her shoulders settled, fractionally, like a wall that has decided not to fall tonight. "They will come," she said. "They will," he agreed. "What's the wound?" She considered him for a moment. "Crossbow bolt. I removed it myself 3 days ago." "With what?" "A belt knife and 3 inches of clean river water." He winced, which he had not done about a wound since he was young. "May I look at it?" The pause was long enough to be meaningful. Then she turned her left side toward him and moved the arm away from her ribs with a careful slowness. The leather had been laced back over the binding she'd made, and the binding was competent but not quite right. The angle had worked against her, doing it alone. Aldrich got his kit from the shelf without ceremony. He had served in 3 frontier campaigns before he had been given this post, and his kit was the kit of a man who had learned to do for himself what no surgeon was near enough to do. He worked quietly, replacing the binding, and she sat still through all of it with a patience that was not passive but chosen, the patience of someone who had decided, deliberately, to let this happen. "Aldrich Vane," he said when he was done. "Watchman." "Vorha," she said, nothing else. He tied off the last knot and sat back in his chair. "There's a bunk in the corner. It's dry and the blanket is clean." She looked at him, and in her amber eyes there was something he had not expected, not gratitude exactly, not yet, but a quality of careful attention, as if she was recalibrating something she had assumed about the world. He had seen that look before. He had seen it on people who had been told, loudly and repeatedly, that they were not welcome anywhere, and then had a door opened for them by someone who had not received that particular message. "Why?" she said. He considered the question seriously. "Because you knocked," he said at last. "You knocked 3 times and you waited. You didn't break the door. That tells me something." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, carefully, favoring the left side, and went to the bunk in the corner and lay down, and she was asleep within 3 breaths, the deep and total sleep of someone who had not allowed themselves to sleep in days. Aldrich banked the fire and climbed to his watch platform and looked out over the pass in the dark, at the white mountains and the iron-cold sky and the road below that was buried under 4 feet of snow. Whatever soldiers were looking for her, they would not come tonight. He would deal with tomorrow when it arrived. He had found in 62 years that this was the only sensible approach to most things. The first soldiers came on the 3rd day. There were 4 of them, out of Eastkeep Garrison, and their sergeant was a red-faced man named Colwick, who had the bearing of someone who had been given a small amount of authority, and had chosen to carry it like a very large amount. He planted himself in Aldrich's doorway. He had not knocked. Soldiers rarely did, and told Aldrich that they were searching for a fugitive orc, a former clan herald who had abandoned her post and stolen regimental documents before fleeing into the mountains. "Dangerous?" Aldrich asked. "Armed and violent," Colwick said. Aldrich noted that his window gave him a partial view of the bunk, where Vorha sat cross-legged with a piece of carved horn she had been working since dawn, her injured arm in its new binding, moving the small knife with the careful patience of a woman in no particular hurry. She had heard the door. She was not hiding. She was, if anything, listening, and he thought that whatever she was waiting to hear, she was not frightened of it. "I'll keep watch for her," Aldrich said. "I'll send word to Eastkeep if she passes through." Colwick peered past him. Aldrich, without moving, somehow managed to be a more complete presence in the doorway than he had been a moment ago. He had been a border watchman for 11 years and a soldier for 14 before that. He knew how to fill a doorframe. "If you're harboring," Colwick began. "I'm harboring nobody," Aldrich said. "I'm a watchman assigned to this pass by regimental authority, and this tower is my post, and my post is my responsibility. When I have something to report to Eastkeep, I'll report it." He looked at the sergeant pleasantly. Safe roads down the valley, ice patches on the lower switchback near the 3rd milepost. They left. Aldrich went back inside and poured himself another cup of tea and sat in his chair, and Vorha put down her carving and looked at him across the room. "You did not tell them," she said. "I told them I'd keep watch," he said. "I am keeping watch." A long silence. Outside, the wind came in off the upper peaks and pressed against the stone walls with a sound like breathing. "What they said about the documents," she said carefully. "I did carry documents when I left. They were mine. Records I had kept for 16 years, clan histories and treaty rolls that bore my hand and my seal. I did not steal them. They were taken from me, wrongly attributed to the garrison's holdings, and I retrieved what was mine." Aldrich said nothing. He drank his tea. "You do not ask if I am telling the truth," she said. "Not yet," he said, "but I'm listening." She looked at him for a long moment with those amber eyes, and then she picked up her carving again, and the silence that fell between them was not empty. It was the kind of silence that fills a room the way warmth does, gradually, from the center outward, until you realize the draft from the door is gone and you cannot remember when it stopped. She had been there 2 weeks when he first understood what she had been. It was not a revelation, more an accumulation, the way understanding usually arrives if you are patient enough to let it. The days had a shape to them now. He climbed to the watch platform at dawn, noted the weather and the road's condition in the register, came down to find she had already stoked the fire and was at the table with her documents spread before her, the oiled cloth folded back, the pages laid in a careful sequence he did not disturb. She worked with 2 tools, a small marking stylus and her own memory, cross-referencing the written pages against something she kept entirely in her head, making small annotations in a margin script too fine for him to read across the room. She did not explain what she was doing, and he did not ask. He made breakfast. They ate. The day arranged itself around the work of 2 people who had found, without discussing it, that they were not bothering each other. He had started reading aloud in the evenings the previous autumn, when Bram's last visit had made him aware of how long it had been since he had heard another voice in the tower. He kept going after Vorha arrived, not for her sake, she had said nothing to invite it, but because it was what he did, and she had stayed in the corner with her carving and listened. On the 3rd evening, without looking up, the garrison's accounting of the Red Gap campaign is incorrect. 32 frontier companies held that pass, not 28. The discrepancy accounts for why the garrison's casualty estimate has never reconciled. He had checked what records he had, and she was right down to the company numbers. After that, he read the reports differently, knowing she was listening, not performing, not explaining, but choosing which passages to read aloud, the way you choose what to say when you know someone is paying real attention. She corrected him twice more in the first week, once gently, once with the faint dryness of someone who found a particular error almost funny, and both times he checked and she was right, and both times she accepted his confirmation with a small nod and went back to her work without comment. The way she knew treaty law, she knew it the way a man knows the shape of his own house in the dark, not because she had studied it but because she had lived in it. She knew which clans had signed which accords and when and what the disputed articles had been, and when he asked her once idly how she knew, she said, "I witnessed the signing of the Greywater Accords. I read the roll." And there had been in her voice no pride, only precision, the precision of someone for whom that history was not an abstraction, but a room she had stood in. Once, during a week when the sleet came down in sheets and the watch platform was unusable past the first morning survey, they spent 3 days almost entirely inside, and the tower was smaller than he had remembered it being, the kind of small that you notice only when there is another person in it. He had expected to find it difficult. He did not. She moved through the space with a consideration that was entirely natural, always choosing the position that did not crowd him, always leaving him his chair, always taking the far end of the table for her documents. She seemed, he thought, like someone who had lived in close quarters with many people, and had learned, from long practice, the art of taking up exactly the space she needed and no more. He asked her about that during the 2nd day of the sleet. She considered the question with the same seriousness she gave to questions about treaty law. "The clan hall," she said. "You learn to move in a clan hall. There are always 40 people doing 40 things, and if you cannot move without collision, you spend your life apologizing." A pause. "I spent the first year apologizing constantly. Then Shatha showed me. She was smaller than I was by half, and she moved through a crowded room like water." She was quiet for a moment. "I have thought about that often. How she took up so little room and yet was never invisible. The opposite. You always knew where she was." It was the most she had said at once, until then. She was, he began to understand, not a soldier. She had the bearing of one, straight, economical, unfrightened, but she was something else. She was a keeper. The clan histories she had spoken of, the records carried for 16 years, they had not been a bureaucrat's burden. They had been her life's work. She did not volunteer this. But over the long winter weeks, through the evenings by the fire and the mornings when he climbed to the watch platform, and she sometimes climbed with him, silent, looking out over the white pass and the gray stone peaks, it assembled itself in the air between them, one piece at a time, the way a picture assembles from a puzzle worked slowly over many sessions. The Iron Hollow clan, that was her people, one of the oldest orc clans to hold territory in the northern range, with a lineage of treaty and trade that went back before any living soldier's grandfather. Their war herald, and he learned this word carefully because she used it with a weight that told him it was precise, not grand, was the keeper of the clan's oral and written histories, the witness to its treaties and its wars, the memory of the people made living. It was not a warrior's role, though a war herald trained in arms. It was a scholar's role and a diplomat's and a keeper's all in one. She had held that role for 16 years. She had lost it, he gathered, from what she did not say as much as from what she did, to a rival within the clan council. A man named Drock, who had wanted the standing her role conferred, and had found in her absence at a campaign border meeting the opportunity to name her a deserter to the garrison, and to the clan elders simultaneously. 2 accusations, 2 institutions, neither one with time to speak to the other before the story hardened into fact. "Why did you not simply come back to your clan?" Aldrich asked one evening, when the fire had burned low and the question had been sitting in the room long enough to earn the asking. She was quiet for a while. The carved horn piece had become, over the weeks, something he could now recognize, a small figure, orc-shaped, seated with both hands on its knees in the pose of a listener. "Because Drock named me before the clan elders first," she said at last. "Before I could return, and the clan elders they are just people. They heard his account while mine was absent. The garrison soldiers came for me while I was still on the road before I could reach the clan hall. I ran because I had not yet found the proof I needed to answer him." She turned the figure in her hands. "The documents I carried are that proof. They establish what I did and did not do at that campaign border meeting, not from my memory, but from the record. The garrison assumed the record was theirs. It is not. It is older than the garrison's presence in this range by 100 years. She set the carved figure down on the floor between them. "I needed somewhere to think," she said, "and to let the wound close." Aldrich looked at the carved figure. It was, he noticed, not quite finished. The face was still smooth, undetailed. "You'll have it," he said, "both." She looked at him for a long moment, then she looked at the fire. A log settled, throwing up a brief spray of sparks, and the warmth in the room deepened by a fraction. "You are a strange man, Aldrich Vane," she said. "I've been called that," he said. The second patrol came on a morning when the pass was clear for the first time in 3 weeks. The sky, a hard bright blue above the peaks, and the road below a white stripe between the dark stone walls of the gorge. Aldrich saw them from the watch platform before they reached the tower, 8 soldiers this time, and at their head, a man in the gray and green of a patrol lieutenant, which was something different from a sergeant. Lieutenants had more authority, and, usually, more intelligence, and they were more difficult to redirect with a pleasantly immovable presence in a doorway. He came down from the platform and told Vorha. She was already standing when he reached the bottom of the stairs. Her arm was better, the binding had been off for 4 days now, and she moved without the careful management of the first weeks, though she still favored it in cold weather. She had her pack in her hand. "You do not need to go," Aldrich said. "If they find me here." "Then I will deal with that," he said. "Put the pack down." She looked at him with a directness that was, by now, familiar to him, the look of a woman who assessed what she saw without embellishment. They will make things difficult for you, she said. I've had difficult, he said. I've had 3 campaigns and 11 winters at this post. I'll have the conversation. She held his gaze for a moment longer. Then she set the pack down. The lieutenant's name was Harren, and he was younger than Colwick and considerably sharper, with the eyes of a man who was good at his work and knew it. He came into the tower this time. Aldrich did not quite manage to fill the doorway for a lieutenant, and he looked around the room with those eyes, and they stopped on Vorha the way a good hunting dog stops when it finds the scent. There she is, Harren said, not unkindly, the way a man says a thing he has been waiting to say. Her name is Vorha, Aldrich said. She is a guest at this post. She is a fugitive. She is a guest at this post, Aldrich said again. Under the Grey Pass Charter, this tower holds hospitality right over any person who reaches it by the mountain road. You can look that up when you get back to Eastkeep. Article 9, Clause 3. It was written when the garrison was founded because nobody wanted soldiers dragging sick merchants out of the tower in February. He paused. It has not been repealed. The lieutenant looked at him for a long moment. Aldrich could see him thinking, which was actually a hopeful sign. She stole regimental documents, Harren said. She has documents in her pack, Aldrich said. I have read some of them. They predate the garrison's presence in this range by roughly a century. They are clan records. She will be glad to demonstrate that to any archivist you care to name. He looked at Harren. Will Eastkeep provide an archivist? A silence. The accusation of desertion, Harren said, more carefully now. She was assigned to the campaign border meeting as a clan liaison. She left before it concluded. She left because she had been named a traitor in absentia to her own clan council at the same moment, Aldrich said. She left to find the proof that would answer that accusation, which she has. He kept his voice level and pleasant. You are dealing with a records dispute between a military garrison and a clan of standing that has held treaty with this garrison for 60 years. I would not recommend settling it by dragging the woman out of my tower in February. Harren looked at him. He looked at Vorha. Vorha looked back at him with the patience of a woman who had decided some time ago that she was done being frightened of soldiers. I will have to send to Eastkeep for instructions, Harren said at last. That sounds right, Aldrich agreed. Safe roads. The ice patches are mostly gone now, but the 3rd milepost switchback still gets slick at night. When they had gone, Aldrich turned around, and Vorha was looking at him with that recalibrating look again, the look she had given him on the first night, when he had stepped back from the door. Article 9, Clause 3, she said. I may have somewhat overstated the specificity, he admitted, but the spirit of it is right. The garrison doesn't like removing guests from this tower in winter, bad for relations with the merchants. She was quiet for a moment. Then, and it was not a small thing, he thought, because she was not a woman who did it lightly, she smiled. Not a wide smile, not a performed smile. A small, precise thing like the carved figure in her hands, exact and careful and entirely real. You are a very strange man, Aldrich Vane, she said. So I'm told, he said and put the pot on. That night he asked her about the clan histories. He had not asked before. It had not been his place to ask, and in any case there had been enough to do. The wound, the soldiers, the meals, the long evenings when she listened while he read and he listened while she sometimes, carefully, spoke. But the evening was quiet and the fire was good, and something had shifted since the lieutenant's visit, some remaining guardedness in her that had let go its last purchase, and so he asked. She looked at him for a long moment. Not warily, but with the particular assessment of a person deciding how much of a thing to give. Then she told him. She talked for 3 hours. She told him about the founding of the Iron Hollow clan in the years before any of the current garrison towns had been built, when the northern range had been held by 6 clans in a careful balance that was not peace but was not war either, a tension kept by negotiation and record, by the testimony of witnesses and the weight of written treaty. She told him about the role of the War Herald, which was older than the clan's written history and had existed first as a purely oral one. A woman or a man trained from childhood to hold the memory of the people, to speak treaties from memory in the form in which they had been agreed, before any ink was dry. She told him how the role had grown to include the written record as literacy spread, how the War Herald had become keeper of both the spoken and the written tradition, the living link between what the clan remembered and what it could prove. She told him about her own apprenticeship, begun at 14 under the previous War Herald, an old woman named Shatha who had held the role for 40 years and who had said to her on the first day, "The record is not yours. It never belongs to you, you belong to it." She told him about the 16 years of work, the campaigns witnessed and documented, the treaties signed and the terms verified, the disputes resolved by the record she carried, disputes between clans that might have become blood quarrels had the record not been there to speak, disputes between the clan and the garrison that had been settled not by force, but by the weight of documented fact. She told him about one such dispute 4 years back, when a garrison officer had claimed rights over a section of the northern pasture that 3 generations of the Iron Hollow clan had grazed without interruption. She had unrolled the pasture record on the officer's own table and pointed to the notation made by the War Herald before her, and the one before that, and the one before that, and the officer had looked at 80 years of the same annotation. The same pasture, the same clan, the same seasonal grazing, written in 3 different hands but in unbroken sequence, and he had quietly dropped the claim. "You won it without a sword," Aldrich said. "The record won it," she said. "I only carried it." A pause. "But yes, that is the point of carrying it." She told him about the clan histories she had added to, year by year. In the careful hand Shatha had taught her not beautiful writing, not grand, but exact. The kind that would still be readable in 100 years by someone who had never met her, and needed to know what had been true. She had written about battles and treaties and droughts and harvests, and the births of clan members who would grow up to be elders, and the deaths of elders who had shaped everything that came after them. She had written about ordinary things, a hard winter, a good trade season, the repair of the clan hall's eastern wall, because ordinary things were what most of life was made of, and the record of ordinary things was what let you understand the shape of a people's life, rather than only its extraordinary moments. Aldrich listened to all of it. He sat in his chair, and he listened the way he had learned to listen in 3 campaigns, the way you listen when someone is telling you something that matters and they know it matters, but they are not sure yet if you do. When she finished, the fire had burned to a low orange pulse, and the tower was very quiet. "You said Shatha told you the record doesn't belong to you," he said. "What does it belong to?" She was quiet for a moment, looking at the embers. "To whoever needs it to be true," she said. "The record belongs to the dispute it will one day settle, to the person who will one day say, 'This is what was agreed and here is the proof.' It doesn't matter who kept it. It matters that it was kept." He thought about that. "And Drock," he said carefully. "If the record settles the dispute, what happens to Drock?" A long pause. "He will stand before the clan elders with the record against him," she said, "and they will do what the elders do. I do not need him punished." She picked up the carved figure from where it sat on the flagstone floor between them. "I need to go home," she said. "That is all." She looked at the smooth, undetailed face of the small carved figure. Then she set it down again. "I will finish it," she said, "when I know how it ends." The answer came from Eastkeep on the 14th day after the lieutenant's visit, and it came not by messenger, but by a different road entirely. Aldrich had climbed to the watch platform in the early morning, the sky still pale in the east and the peaks dark against it, and he had seen them coming from a long way off, because there were too many of them to miss. They were moving up the pass road from the west, from the clan territories, not from Eastkeep, not from any garrison direction. 40, perhaps 50 figures, the bulk of them moving with the particular purposeful unhaste of orc warriors on a formal errand, their breath fogging in the cold. At their center, carried on a frame of blackwood and iron, rode a figure he could not yet resolve at this distance, wrapped in the heavy gray furs of a clan elder. He went back down the stairs. Vorha was already by the window. She had sharp eyes, better than his at distance, and that was saying something. She was very still. "Who is the elder?" he asked. "Grandmother Tessava," she said. Her voice had changed. Not broken, Vorha's voice did not break, but altered in quality, the way a note changes when it finds its proper resonance. "She is the eldest of the clan council. She was Shatha's teacher before Shatha was mine." A pause. "She does not travel in winter." "She traveled now," Aldrich said. Vorha looked at him. There was something in her face that he had not seen there before, a crack in the precision, not weakness but arrival, as if something she had been carrying at a distance had just come close enough to feel. "She came for me," Vorha said, in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "She came for the truth," Aldrich said, "and you happen to be where the truth is." He went to put the pot on, because 50 people in a mountain pass in February were going to want something hot, and there was no other sensible response to the situation. The elder's party filled the space below the tower and spilled up to the walls, and the warriors, stone-faced, broad, their braids dressed for formal occasion, stood back with a deference that was itself a statement, because warriors of that bearing did not stand back for much. At the center of the cleared space, Grandmother Tessava's frame had been set down on the snow, and 2 of the warriors had helped her rise, and she stood now in the cold morning air with the absolute stillness of a woman who had stood in many cold morning airs, and found them all equally manageable. She was old. Even at this distance it was a fact that imposed itself. The deep-set amber eyes in the face that time had carved like water-carved stone, the white braids pinned back with iron, the furred wrappings that could not disguise the uprightness of her spine. She looked at the tower with an expression Aldrich could not read at distance, and then her eyes found him, standing in the doorway, and she looked at him for a moment before looking past him at Vorha, who had come to stand at his shoulder. The sound Tessava made then was not a word. It was a syllable, low and precise, in the clan tongue, and whatever it meant, whatever exactly it was, every warrior in the courtyard below went entirely still when she made it. Then Vorha was past him and down the steps and crossing the snow, and the 2 women stood together in the winter light, the young one and the old one, and whatever passed between them then Aldrich could not hear. He watched from the doorway with his arms folded, and his shoulder leaned against the frame, as a man watches something that is not his business to intrude upon, but that he is glad to witness. One of the warriors, a broad, gray-green woman with a long scar along her jaw, came to the doorway. She looked at Aldrich with an assessing directness that reminded him of Vorha. "You kept her safe," the warrior said. "She came to a door," Aldrich said. "I opened it." The warrior's expression did not change, but something in it did, some inner evaluation completing itself. She looked back at where Vorha and Tessava stood, and then back at him. "The grandmother will want to speak with you," she said. "Then I'll make more tea," Aldrich said. It took most of the morning. The warriors ranged themselves around the base of the tower with the ease of people accustomed to standing in cold places, and 2 of them built a second fire in the courtyard from wood they had brought themselves, and several produced provisions from the packs they carried, and the whole thing arranged itself with the quiet competence of a people who knew how to wait in winter. Aldrich's tower had never had so many people near it, and it should have felt intrusive, and it did not. It felt like the word Vorha had used once, in passing, about the clan hall, like a place where something that mattered was happening. He brought out what provisions he had, dried pork and oat bread and the last of the riverberry, which he had been rationing since January, and set them on the stone ledge by the courtyard fire, and nobody commented on it, and several people helped themselves with the same quiet naturalness with which people do a thing that has clearly been offered. One of the younger warriors, a girl of perhaps 22, in the thick braids of recent formal recognition, came to thank him with a careful formality that he recognized, with a start, as the clan language's formal register, the one used for acknowledged acts of standing. He did not know enough of it to respond in kind, so he nodded, which she seemed to accept. Tessava came inside with Vorha and a young warrior who served as her aide, and she sat in Aldrich's chair by the fire. He brought the second chair from the corner, and she looked at him with those deep-set amber eyes for a long moment before she spoke. "You are the watchman," she said. Her voice was old and dry and very steady. Her frontier tongue was accented but precise. "Aldrich Vane," he said. "Vorha has told me what you did," she said. "Not at length. She is not a woman who speaks at length about things that matter to her, but she told me enough." She looked at him steadily. "You held the door against the soldiers." "I cited the charter," he said. "No," she said, with a precision that reminded him of Vorha so strongly that he nearly smiled. "You cited the charter in the service of a reason that had nothing to do with the charter. The charter was the tool. The reason was that she was a person in your house, and you were not going to let her be taken from it without cause you believed in." She held his gaze. "That is a different thing from the charter." He said nothing. "I have been elder of the Iron Hollow clan for 31 years, she said. "In that time I have dealt with garrison commanders and patrol captains and 3 different regimental authorities. What I have found, as a rule, is that the treaty holds where the people on both sides of it choose to hold it, not because of the words, because of the people." She looked at him. "You are one of those people." Aldrich was not, in general, a man made uncomfortable by directness. He had spent 11 years talking to mountain weather, merchants in distress, and occasional hostile wildlife. He had found that honest attention asked for in return, not deflection. "The treaty should hold anyway," he said. "It's a good treaty." "It is," she agreed, "but good treaties need good witnesses." Then she looked at Vorha, who was standing beside the fire with her arms folded, watching the exchange with the attention of a war herald recording testimony. "Drak has been heard," Tessava said. She spoke to Vorha now, and her voice carried in it a weight that was not anger. It was older than anger. "The documents you carried were reviewed by the full council 3 days past. There was a courier from Eastkeep, as well. The garrison archivist who reviewed the originals agreed they predate garrison authority in this range. The council heard the record." A pause. "The council heard the record," she said again, and in the repetition was the weight of what that meant in clan law when the war herald's record spoke. Vorha was very still. "Drak named me before I could speak," she said. Her voice was measured, precise, but there was something under the precision now, something that had been held a very long time. "He did," Tessava said, "and the record answered him, as the record always answers." She looked at Vorha steadily. "You are restored, Vorha. You were never truly removed. The council has clarified that a hearing is required before a war herald may be stripped, and no hearing was held. You were named and the name was false, and the false name is stricken." She paused. "And Drak has been heard in full on the record with the record present. He will not name anyone again." The fire settled. Outside, the sound of the warriors' voices moved through the courtyard, low and easy, the sound of people at rest on a task completed. Vorha said nothing for a long time. "I needed to bring the proof back myself," she said at last. "I needed to return with it in my hands." "And you will," Tessava said, "in spring, when the pass road opens fully." She looked at Aldrich. "If the watchman will have you until then." Aldrich looked at the second chair, which had been in the corner of his room for 3 winters, and at the carved figure on the flagstone by the hearth, its face still smooth and unfinished, waiting to know how the story ended. "The bunk's dry," he said. I made more tea. Tessava looked at him, and in her old amber eyes there was something that was not quite a smile, but was closer to one than he had expected to see. Aldrich Vane of the Greypest Watchtower, she said, with the careful cadence of a woman who named things precisely when naming them mattered. The Iron Hollow clan calls you friend of the clan. This is not a courtesy. It is a standing in our law, and it is recorded. She looked at him evenly. The record will say your name when this winter is described. The record will say what you did. That is the clan's memory, and the clan's memory does not forget. Aldrich was quiet for a moment. That's a considerable thing for an open door, he said. An open door in winter, Vorha said, without looking up from the fire, is everything. The warriors stayed 2 nights. They had not intended to, but the weather came back with a particular mountain February viciousness, a driving sleet that sealed the pass road under a new skin of ice and made the lower camps impossible. Aldrich had never had 50 guests and had found, to his moderate surprise, that his tower was more adaptable than he had believed. The warriors supplied their own provisions and their own fire, and they were quiet in the way that people are quiet when they are accustomed to large company in small spaces, and they took up no more room than they needed, and treated the tower's interior with a scrupulous care that might have seemed formal, except that it was also simply natural. The way a people behave when they regard where they are as deserving of respect. Tessava sat in the chair by the fire and read the clan documents Vorha had carried, and Aldrich sat in the other chair and read his garrison reports, and Vorha sat between them and worked on the carved figure, and the 3 of them shared the fire with the comfort of people who had not known each other long, but had, for whatever reason, fallen into a natural arrangement. The warrior with the scarred jaw, her name was Gret, and she had been Vorha's escort in earlier years, and she had a dry, precise humor that had made Aldrich like her immediately. Took it upon herself to show 2 of the younger warriors how the watch platform worked, the signaling mirrors and the record log, and the way the pass sightlines were mapped. They were, she told him later, interested in how the garrison documented the road. They kept a similar record themselves, from the clan side, and it had not occurred to them that there was a human man up here keeping a record that ran parallel to theirs. For 11 years, Aldrich said. Gret looked at him. Your records and ours have never been compared, she said. No, he said. She was quiet for a moment. They should be, she said. There would be useful information in the overlap. Write to your council, Aldrich said. I'll write to Eastkeep. Something shifted in Gret's expression, not surprise exactly, but the particular look of a person who has, without expecting to, found an ally where they were not looking for one. I will, she said. On the second evening, one of the younger warriors, a boy of perhaps 20, which for an orc meant he had been formally recognized as an adult for 2 or 3 years, and was still learning what that meant, came and sat near Aldrich and asked him, with a careful politeness, what it was like to watch the same road for 11 years. Aldrich thought about it. Quiet, he said, and then occasionally not. The young warrior looked at the door with an expression that managed to be both respectful and slightly wary, as if the door had demonstrated a capacity for dramatic events that it had been concealing up to now. Do you think it will be quiet again? The young warrior asked. Aldrich thought of the carved figure on the flagstones, its face still waiting to be finished. Different kind of quiet, he said. The sleet broke on the 3rd morning, and the warriors prepared to go. The leave-taking was formal the way that important things are formal, not stiff, not ceremonial for ceremony's sake, but weighted with a seriousness that acknowledged what had happened here and what it meant. Tessava was carried back to her frame by her warriors with a care that was precise and also deeply affectionate, the care of people who loved her and were not embarrassed about it. Gret shook Aldrich's hand in the garrison manner, which she had clearly looked up, and her grip was solid and direct and entirely equal. The young warrior from the evening before gave him a small piece of carved mountain stone, not finished to any particular shape, just smoothed by handling, and said, in formal frontier tongue that he had prepared, that it was a tradition of his family to give a stone from the northern range to anyone who had been kind in the mountains. "So you remember the mountain was kind to you too," he said. Aldrich put the stone in his coat pocket and kept it there. Tessava spoke to him last, from her frame before they moved. "She will return to the clan hall in spring," she said, "to present the record to the full assembly and to resume her work." She looked at him steadily. "The road from the clan hall to this tower in summer is 11 days' travel." "I know the distance," Aldrich said. "11 days is not far," Tessava said, and looked at him with those old amber eyes and said nothing more. The weeks that followed were the longest of that winter, and, he would think afterward, among the best. The pass stayed mostly closed. There were merchant convoys in the valleys below waiting for the spring thaw, and a handful of lone travelers who came through and stayed a night and moved on, and one more patrol from Eastkeep, a different lieutenant this time, who had clearly been briefed on the clan delegation's visit and who said almost nothing, checked the register, and left. The tower was as it had always been: stone and fire and wind, the watch platform above and the long sightlines down the white road. But it was different. It was different because Vorha sat across the fire in the evenings and finished the documents she had been annotating since she arrived. The clan records, re-indexed and cross-referenced, her hand moving across the page in that careful exact script she had learned from Shatha. It was different because she talked, now, more than she had before the delegation's visit, not more than was natural for her, which was still less than most people, but more than the careful ration she had allowed herself when she had still been calculating what was safe. She talked about the clan hall, about the assembly room where the records were kept and the smell of it, old paper and pine resin, not so different from his tower. She talked about the members of the council and what each of them was like, with a precision that was not unkind but was entirely honest. She talked about Shatha, who had died 6 years ago, and what she had been like, and what it had been like to lose her. He talked too. He talked about the campaigns, not the battles, which he did not find worth talking about, but the people, the men he had served with, the friends he had made and kept and sometimes lost. He talked about the valley below where he had grown up, and the family that was mostly gone now, a sister still in the valley, her children grown. He talked about the 11 years at the tower and what it had been like, the long quiet and the occasional not quiet, and what he had made of the solitude, which was more than he usually admitted to having made. She listened the way she always listened, completely, without interjection, with the attention of a woman who understood that listening was itself a form of work and deserved to be done properly. He asked her, one evening, what she would do differently when she returned, if she would do anything differently. She considered the question for a long time. "I will recommend that the clan establish a formal exchange of past records with the garrison," she said at last. "Gret is right that the overlap would be useful. There is history in the matching of 2 records kept by 2 different hands over the same ground. The discrepancies tell you as much as the agreements." She paused. "And I will tell the council what I found here." "What did you find here?" he said. She looked at the fire for a moment. Then she looked at him, and in her amber eyes was that quality he had first seen on the night she arrived. Not gratitude exactly, but something larger than gratitude, the recalibration not of an expectation but of an assumption about the world. "That an open door does not require a reason," she said. "That some people do the decent thing because it is the decent thing, and they do not need it to be complicated." She held his gaze. "I had forgotten that. I had spent enough time in places where decency is complicated that I had stopped believing it could be simple." A pause. "I was wrong." Aldrich looked at the fire. "You weren't wrong to be careful," he said. "You'd earned careful." "I had," she said, "but I had also earned this." The fire settled between them. and the wind moved around the tower's old stones, and the pass below lay white and waiting for spring. On the morning she left, he climbed to the watch platform before first light and watched the sky lighten over the eastern peaks, the pale gold coming up from behind the mountains and spreading across the blue, and he thought about 11 years of that sky and what it had looked like to him at different points in those years. The first year, still adjusting. The middle years, settled. The last 3, very quiet. And this winter, which had been different. He came down when he heard her moving below. She had packed with the same efficiency she did everything, a tight, organized pack, nothing wasted. The documents were wrapped in oiled cloth at the center of it, the most protected thing she carried, as they always had been. She had her clan leathers on and her arm fully healed and her iron-dark braids pinned back in the formal manner, which told him she was traveling as the war herald, not as a fugitive, and he found he was glad of that. She picked up the carved figure from the flagstones and looked at it for a moment. She had finished it sometime in the last 2 weeks. The face was carved now, orc-featured, precise. The amber eyes suggested in the grain of the horn rather than painted in. It was a figure seated with both hands on its knees in the position of a listener, the position Shatha had taught her. She had made it, he understood now, as the record of this winter, as the clan's memory made small. She held it out to him. He took it. "The record says your name," she said. "But the record is in the clan hall. This is for the tower." She looked at him steadily. "So the tower remembers too." He held the small figure in his palm for a moment. It was no larger than his fist and warm from her hands, and exact in every detail she had chosen to put in it, which was, he understood, every detail that mattered. "Safe road," he said. 11 days, she said. He looked at her. 11 days, she said again, with the precision of a woman who repeats a thing when she wants to make certain it has been heard, "in summer, which comes." He was quiet for a moment. "I'll be here," he said. She held his gaze for a moment longer. That steady, complete amber gaze, the one that saw without embellishment and did not look away from what it found. Then she went. He stood in the doorway and watched her go down the pass road, straight-backed and purposeful, the pack settled high on her shoulders, moving with the particular unhaste of a person who knows where they are going and has decided that they will get there. The morning light was full now, warm and clear on the white of the road, and she was a dark shape against it, growing smaller, and he watched until the road bent around the first outcrop of rock and she was gone. He went back inside. He set the carved figure on the shelf above the fire, where the light would fall on it in the mornings. It looked right there. It looked, he thought, like something that had always been there, which was the best thing you could say about something new, that it fit the space it had found as if the space had been waiting for it. He put the pot on. Outside, the pass road gleamed in the spring-coming light, and the mountains stood in their old places, and the world, which had been very quiet for a long time, had become a different kind of quiet, the kind that is not empty but full, that holds not the absence of things but the space between arrivals. 11 days in summer. Which comes.